1 week season.
What is going on, 1 week season fam, DFS fam? Welcome to the DFS Lab, edition number 3, week 15. I am your host, JMToWin, here with Keegan, KTM128. Keegan, my man, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Ready to get this lineup in.
Ready to get this lineup in. By the way, if you're listening to this on YouTube, feel free to throw us on 1.5x speed or 2x speed. Catch the whole thing in, whatever that'll be, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on how long we go here. Keegan, I want to start this lineup with a building block that I'm going to throw your way and see what you want to do with it. So I'm going to throw this building block your way, see what questions you have on it or thoughts you have on it, and then we'll dive in. It's going to be Mac Jones at quarterback with Nelson Agholor and Kendrick Bourne.
Okay, so, I mean, automatically what I see off of this is super cheap, allows you to do a lot. You have a lot of room to work with here.
It allows you to do a ridiculous amount with your roster. Have you built any of these yet this week?
No, I've been looking at them. I actually watched a video about one last night.
Okay.
Didn't do it, but I was like, eh.
that was kind of my and that was kind of my reaction too. And I always watch for that, where the plays where my first reaction is like, no. And remember when it was in October and I was in Oklahoma and we were at Mimi's house and you mentioned Jacoby Myers to me that week, and he was coming back from injury and playing with, I think he was still playing with Bailey Zappi. And I was like, nah, dude, no. And then, 2 days later, I kept thinking about it, and he ended up on my main build that week. That was week he put up 27 points, which doesn't mean that these guys will do that. But I always look for those spots. And I kind of had the same thing with Mac Jones earlier this week. And I started thinking about it last night because I try to watch for these thought patterns. Last night, I was thinking about this, how early in the week I was like, ooh, maybe Mac Jones. And then when I was on my Roto Grinder show this week, Squirrel Patrol said maybe Mac Jones is a cheap quarterback. And he's got 2 seats in the live final this week. So we were kind of talking about his potentially what he would be doing there with, I think it's $5 million to first place out of 200 entries. And he mentioned Mac Jones, and I was like, yes. And I said, like, that was my reaction, but I still hadn't built any Mac Jones rosters. And then I added him to the player grid and took him off and added him back on. And those patterns kind of lead to me to realize, hey, this is a guy that people don't feel comfortable playing, but he is still sharp. We're basically saying if the Raiders score some points, or even if they don't score some points and the Patriots touchdown just come through the air, we end up with some really sharp points in this spot. Next question I want to ask you then is, do we want to build this for the same type of contest we did yesterday, which was, talking 10,000, 12,000 entries, somewhere in that range? Or do we want to build it for smaller field contests? Because there are different ways I'd play it based on that.
Is a smaller field, are we going to build it a little more chalky? Is that what you're
So the smaller field, the big difference is whether or not I'll bring it back with Davante Adams. And so if I'm going the full stack, which right now we've got Mac and Agholor in here, which we could stop there if we want. But if we go the full stack and add in Kendrick Bourne, if I'm playing small field, I would basically look at it as like these are highly, not guaranteed points, but highly likely points, right? And they don't need a game environment that goes off for them to combine for 40 to 45 points. Mac Jones can throw for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Mac Jones plus Agholor plus Bourne ends up potentially being on a winning roster in smaller field. But if I'm in large field play, I would essentially say, yeah, that's good enough in terms of points. But what I really want is that scenario. I've had so many times where I've been like, well, all I need is like the 40 points from these guys. And then the whole game goes off. These guys combine for 60, but like Davante Adams on the other side goes for 35 or 40, right? So in large field play, I want to make like the full bet and say, let me bring in Davante Adams. Even though I expect him to get like 20 to 22 points here, let me hope that he gets 30, 35 and this game just kind of takes off. Whereas in smaller field, I would still play Davante if I wanted to, but I'd be more comfortable leaving him off that roster.
Okay, so question here. Would you ever think about playing the other side of this? Like, I know maybe you're playing this side because Mac Jones is such a cheap pick and it allows you to be really flexible with everything else salary-wise. But what do you think about Derek Carr?
Yeah, so I made a note on Derek Carr today in our cheat sheet ownership projections. He's a guy who can put up like a bigger score than people realize in this spot. He can put up 22 to 26 points. He's 5,400, 5,600. So, yeah, I mean, I think that he's interesting this week because basically if Mahomes, Hurts, Herbert, Burrow, like one of those guys probably gets up to about 30 points, right? But if none of them go for over 30 points, one of these cheaper guys getting like 24 or 25 actually has a ton of value. So yeah, I like Carr as well in this spot, especially in the types of contests that we've talked about, like these larger field contests, because Carr can put up, again, he can put up 250 yards. He can actually put up 300 yards and multiple touchdowns. So I think he's an interesting play this week as well.
Okay, sweet. Well, I think we should do the large. We got a little off track there. Sorry about that. But
oh no, you're good. Have you built some Carr rosters this week?
I haven't. I really have stayed away from this game. I've been all over the Eagles game, to be honest.
Okay. Oh, nice. And what have you been doing there? Have you been a lot of the like Hurts and Sanders, Hurts and Goddard?
Yeah. Tons of different things like we talked about, like you have that one lineup and then you just build around it all over the place, I
have like 25 new Mac Jones lineups that I built last night. That's like all variations of how I can mix and match like the salary saved with this roster.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, and this is also another thing too that I like about this exercise of like building these rosters is maybe this doesn't even go into play for you or for a listener or whatever, but it's just like to challenge yourself and open up your mind to different things. Like Sonic, who does our MME stuff on the site, Millie Maker winner, he typically builds at least one roster around every game on the slate, right? So no matter how ugly the game is, he'll build at least one roster around it because it forces you to think about that game. And when you kind of do that, you start seeing some spots like this where you're like, oh, but this is actually pretty interesting. And I actually think that Mac plus one or two wideouts will be somewhat popular in high dollar, smaller entry stuff where you got a lot of sharp players and they're just going to say, let me take the savings here and then be able to pay up for Jamar Chase and Derrick Henry and Travis Kelce and like whoever else I want. So we're going to do large field. So I would throw with large field, I'd do like the full bet. I'd throw Bourne in here. Bourne's only 3,100. Bourne and Mac Jones last year combined for like 4 or 5 games of 40 plus points. And then I'd also bring in Devontae Adams and just say like, maybe it doesn't go nuclear, but we complete it's 20K, 20.5K in total salary. So we only need like 80 points, but realistically, Mac plus the 2 wideouts could go for Mac can go for 25. These guys could go for 35. You got 60 points there. Devontae can go for 35. You've got 95 points from this block, which people won't have. So yeah, in large field play, I really like this.
So you've been saying like this whole season, pick one of the two, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, and they're getting a 30 bomber. What do you think if we throw in Josh Jacobs on another roster, if somebody else was to say?
Yeah. So this is one of the weeks. So it had been, for anybody who's like new here, who's just found us on YouTube, we've been 8 consecutive weeks. We throw out the Devontae flu game, 8 consecutive weeks where one of Devontae or Jacobs had scored 30 plus. And this has been a season where 30 plus point scores have been pretty rare. So like having that coin flip 50-50 bet has just been so valuable. So for me, I've had a lot of weeks where like 150 rosters, every single roster has one of these two. So yeah, this week it's interesting. Last week they finally broke that streak against the Rams, and then the Patriots are a really good defense. At the same time, there's 2 ways I'm looking at Jacobs. On the one hand, the Patriots are on track for the 7th time in 8 years to allow like bottom 3 running back rushing touchdowns. Their whole defense is set up to not allow running backs to score. So they've allowed 4 total running back touchdowns. 22 teams have allowed 10 or more running back touchdowns. Patriots have allowed the fewest, tied with the Titans. So that hurts Josh Jacobs, right? At his price tag, you probably need a 2 touchdown game. And yet, if you look at Jacobs' big games, his 51 pointer, he only had 2 scores. So that's 39 points before the touchdowns. He had another game with like 27 points before the touchdowns. Another game, I think, just north of 30 before the touchdowns. So he's like the really rare guy that can put up a 30-pointer without the touchdown. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of generally off of him this week just because I never play running backs against the Patriots. But at the same time, it's like, well, what if he catches 6 passes and rushes for over 100 yards and like doesn't need the touchdowns in order to get there? So yeah, I mean, I think obviously I wouldn't play them together because of the salary, but I think that it is interesting to like, I'm not going 100% these guys this week, but maybe like 30 to 40% of my rosters will have one or the other on them, I guess is how I'll probably end up.
Okay. So basically like if you make one lineup with Adams, maybe do another lineup with Jacobs, right?
Yeah. Where we're doing this thing where we're like, hey, we're building a lot of lineups and again, maybe we won't put them all in play, but like we're going to build a bunch of lineups and find some that we really like. You could be like, okay, we've got this one. And then we just start with the same core of Mac and Aguilar and Bourne, throw in Jacobs. And you could even like eventually mix in Tyquan Thornton, who sees a lot of targets near the line of scrimmage. So like his chances of like a 4 or 5 point game are higher, but he can also bust a big gain. And so yeah, like you could just start. You could build 150 rosters with like Mac and cheap pieces and like variations of the Raiders, basically. And Damian Harris is out now, and I mean, I don't think Ramondre is going to play, but we won't probably find that out till like a Schefter bomb late tonight.
Yeah.
I say that about Ramondre because he didn't practice all week. He didn't, he left the game last week. He didn't practice all week until Friday. It was a limited practice, but if it's the Patriots, right? Limited could mean he played one snap in practice, and they just want to put that out there for the Raiders. So we can actually end up on Sunday morning with Kevin Harris and Pierre Strong also in play. Both of them are 4K this week. So
Wow.
yeah, there's just a lot that you can do with this Patriots offense.
That's fantastic. So our salary right now is 5.9 for our remaining players. What do you want to do with the rest of that? Should we go?
I'm gonna throw that to you. What would you typically do here?
Typically, I mean, I start bottom top once I like get my main core in there. So like I like to go cheap stuff first. So obviously the defense.
And I know you've been building a lot of Broncos defense this week, right?
Dude, I've been like looking so much, and it's
Go
like
find something else.
yeah, because
Yeah.
I'm gonna get bit if I keep doing the same defense over. And I'm just doing.
Yeah. So and I think it's interesting because I don't think like the Broncos aren't a great defense. They're not a bad defense, but they're not a great defense this week. But I think that everybody kind of feels the same way. It's like, well, where else do I even go, right? Broncos are middle of the pack in pressure rate. They're middle of the pack in sacks. They're middle of the pack in turnovers forced. Colt McCoy's played 6 like basically full games since the start of last year. He has 3 interceptions in 6 games. He's taken 2 sacks per game. So it's not like, again, we talked about this the other day. It's not like your typical backup quarterback where you're just going to make a ton of mistakes. So I kind of think like the chances of the Broncos finishing above the 5 to 8 point range are way lower than most people realize, right? And people are just on the Broncos because it's like, well, who else do I go to? So the way I'm kind of looking at defense, and I'll have plenty of Broncos, but the way I'm really looking at defense is like, well, if I get the wrong defense and it scores 4 points, I'm not going to be buried if the Broncos score 7. You know what I mean? Because I don't expect the Broncos to put up like 16. And so since I don't expect the Broncos to put up a huge score, I'm really like mixing and matching. I think the Lions have become interesting with Zach Wilson starting. They're 3K, so just a few hundred more. We're not playing the Patriots on this roster because both of Mac Jones 20-pointers this year. The Patriots scored like 2 and 4 points on defense. So we're betting against the Patriots defense here. But yeah, the Lions, the Panthers, getting up to the Eagles is another interesting way to go. And we would still have the salary to do that on this roster and probably still fit in all the upside we want to. The Bears have taken, I think it was the 5th most sacks and then turned the ball over the 8th most times. Eagles are number 1 in sacks now, ahead of the Cowboys, number 1 in turnovers forced. And that's a team that like people just are like, well, I don't want to play against Justin Fields, but Justin Fields, just like Josh Allen, right? He still makes mistakes. He still takes sacks. He still turns the ball over. So yeah, I'm just kind of like, and if the Eagles score 7, they're still probably matching the Broncos, right? I spent a little more in salary, but I'm not behind the field. So yeah, I have had a lot of fun, like just mixing and matching different defenses this week.
What do you think? One more defense. You hadn't mentioned it. What do you think about the Cowboys this week?
Yeah, I mean, so Trevor Lawrence gets the ball out quickly, doesn't take a lot of sacks, doesn't turn the ball over a ton. But then we could say the same thing about Derek Carr, and I'm on the Patriots defense. So I've kind of had that thought, right, where I've been like, well, the Patriots are a strong defense. But then it's like, yeah, but then by that measure, so are the Cowboys. Right? Like the Raiders, like bottom 4 in sacks allowed, bottom 4 in turnovers. So yeah, no, I like that call. I would be just comfortable going with the Cowboys as the Patriots.
Okay. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's another one's going to be low owned, right? And we can, if we wanted, we could throw in like the cheapest one that we like, right? We could throw in like the Lions or the Panthers and then see what else we have elsewhere. Or we could just toss in like the Eagles or Cowboys and see if we can make that fit.
You know what? I love that actually because I've been looking at the Panthers. I've just been glancing at them, haven't pulled the trigger, but I think let's do it.
Basically the same as the Broncos in terms of sacks, in terms of turnovers forced, and playing, Mason Rudolph or Mitch Trubisky as opposed to playing Colt McCoy. So yeah, I really like that play at 3,300.
Awesome. Okay, and I think our next choice here is going to be the running back. And now we have 6.5 for the remaining.
Yeah, 6.5 is pretty nice too. And I would also say, like, if we get a sense of what we want to do at tight end, it can answer a lot of questions for us.
I didn't even see that we hadn't done tight end.
at this point, because then it can be like, are we, because there's such a gap, right, between like if you pay for Kelsey or pay down, your whole salary structure is totally different. So we can really kind of answer that question for ourselves here.
Okay. We've been on like this theme of these salary savers. I kind of want to try it here as well. Like little stars and what is it called?
Stars and scrubs.
Yes.
All right. I like it.
Do you like Okonkwo this week? What do you think?
Yeah, totally fine with Okonkwo this week. I've even had I have some Herbert plus Mike Williams plus Derrick Henry plus Okonkwo bets, basically saying, I think Okonkwo and Henry combined for like 42 points last week. They need like 44 to keep you on a 200-point pace. And they only combined for two touchdowns last week, or maybe, 2 touchdowns last week. But that's pretty much in line with like what they should be able to do in this spot, right? Derrick Henry could get the 2 touchdowns, or Chig could get 1. Henry could get 1 or 2. So, but yeah, I like Okonkwo solo. I like him without any Chargers pieces. I like him with pieces from that game. But yeah, I mean, he's going to be a schemed part of the offense. And I think when a guy has a good game and he's cheap, people are always like, was that fluky? Am I a donkey for playing him this week? So even if he has a 6-point game, like he was still a good play this week because he's part of the schemed offense. We expect the Chargers to be scoring points. The Titans are going to have to pass a little bit. So like 5 to 7 targets is clearly his range. A 31+ yard reception in 4 of his last 6 games, which like no tight ends. I don't think Hayden Hurst has had a 31-yard reception all season. To get a guy who can do that 4 times in 6 games, like that's a lot of upside on that play.
Now, Okonkwo and Conklin are the same price. If you had to choose between those two, I guess it might depend on the roster, but personally, like most of the time, which would you choose?
Okonkwo. So Zach Wilson, when they were playing a totally different offense with Zach Wilson under center, and I fell into it was a ton of 12 personnel, which was 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers. And then when Mike White came in, they after one game, first game against Chicago, they played a lot of 12 personnel, and then they shifted. The second and third games, it was all 11 personnel. You got 3 wideouts. You're throwing the ball proactively. And I fell into this trap when Mike White was out, Zach Wilson's in it, to be like, hey, maybe Zach Wilson has a good game. And maybe he does. But if you're the Jets, you're not going to suddenly be like they need to win this game to make the playoffs. They're not going to be like, all right, let's just turn it over to Mike White, let him sling the ball around the yard. So I think that to Zach Wilson, let him sling the ball around. I think that they're going to play things the way that they were playing things with Zach Wilson before, which is like, let's try to play defense. Let's keep the ball on the ground. Let's play 2 tight ends. So that's kind of taken me off of Elijah Moore a little bit more this point in the week, just because he was the guy whose snaps were sacrificed in that setup. And then it also takes me off of Conklin a little bit more. It takes me off Garrett Wilson a little bit more. So I still I'll have all of those guys, but I'll have less of them than I kind of thought a couple days or yesterday when we first got the Mike White news. Because really the Jets are going to still run their Zach Wilson offense, So I'd take Okonkwo over Tyler Conklin for sure.
Sweet. All right, and now we're ready to go to the running backs with a whopping 7-7.
Dude, we've got so much salary here.
Awesome.
We can basically go. We could go Derrick Henry, Jamar Chase, James Conner. We could go Derrick Henry, Miles Sanders, Jamar Chase. Either way, though, we're going to have we're going to have to spend salary, right? Either way, we're going to have Derrick Henry. We're going to have Devontae Adams. We're going to have Jamar Chase all on this roster together, which is a really nice setup. And then basically whatever number 2 running back you want. And we don't have to go Derrick Henry if there's another running back you like up here either.
I love Derrick Henry. He burned me last week, but we talked about player bias, and I try not to have a bias when it comes to.
Yeah, exactly. And he was at 23 points at halftime, and then got totally game scripted out of that one. So as long as that doesn't happen here, he's got a good shot at 30 to 35 points.
I apologize. That was 2 weeks ago that he burned me.
Oh, 2 weeks ago he had didn't he have an 8-pointer a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, it was 5 points.
I had good Derrick Henry as well.
I had him and Nick Chubb in almost every lineup, and
that was a bad week to have those two. That was a week where I had a horrible week that week as well. Yeah, just one of those things.
So there's also one more running back. We can definitely play Derrick Henry still, but what do you think about Tony Pollard?
Yeah, so Pollard, I was looking last night at pre-touchdown fantasy scoring, which is something that I like to look at a lot in terms of, where did I leave these notes? Was it in my phone? Pre-touchdown fantasy scoring helps us get a sense of if we take out the touchdown variance, then what do these players do, right? I don't know where my list was on that, but Tony Pollard is averaging, I think it's like 11.1 pre-touchdown points, which basically should have him priced at like 5K to 5.5K, something like that. For context, Rachaad White has averaged 11.8 pre-touchdown points the last 2 weeks with sharing snaps with Leonard Fournette. So Tony Pollard is like massively dependent on the touchdowns.
Right.
I still like him this week, but I just say that to say, and in fact, let's look at this roster real quickly, because to me, it would come down to like, how much risk do we need to take on? Tony Pollard, we need a lot to go right in order for him to like be on our tournament winning roster. So on this roster, we don't necessarily need a lot to go right, as in we just need, so far, we just need the Patriots and Raiders game to have some points, which really we just need Davante Adams to put up points, forces the Patriots to pass. These guys are cheap enough. They don't need a monster game. So literally right now we're just betting on Davante Adams having a big game, and that gets 4 of our spots right. So I do have like a high level of risk tolerance in other spots, as in like I would be willing to take on a play like Pollard. The other side of that is we have a really unique setup. Like very few people will have Mac Jones, Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, Davante Adams. So it's not like we need to take on additional risk if we don't want to. So if this were like super chalky, then I'd be like, well, it's super chalky, but we're not taking on a lot of risk. And then we can take on risk with the Pollard bet. But since it's non-risky and non-chalky, I'd be fine being like, hey, what's our highest likelihood points here? So either way works. I'm going to have like a tiny bit of Pollard this week, but the way I'm looking at him is like, okay, we need like another 2 to 3 touchdown game for him to be the guy who we need. And even at his price, not only like a 2 to 3 touchdown game, but we need some of these other guys to disappoint as well.
Right. And I know like the way you mentioned that, it makes complete sense, because I've always noticed when I watch the Cowboys play that if Pollard doesn't get the touchdown, like say he's like 30 yards out and he gets to the goal line.
Yeah, they're throwing Zeke.
Dude. They'll just give Zeke the ball and let him make the touchdown.
Yeah, like Pollard's got to score from like 10 yards out or more.
Yeah.
And then if they get in close, then they've got to appease Jerry Jones and
give
Zeke the ball.
Oh man, it's rough. So I mean, I'm down for whatever. What do you want to do on this one, Pollard? Or can we
I've done a lot of like Derrick Henry, Jamar Chase, running back. So I'd be fine doing something different, or I'd be fine doing that because this is our last show of the week and people can kind of see what that looks like. In fact, we can go both ways, right? Like throw in Derrick Henry, throw in Jamar Chase, and we'll see what we have left at salary. I mean, this is probably a roster that I've already built this week, to be honest. And once we throw in Chase, well, I'll just wait till you do it. So I'll
6-8 left.
I don't watch the math. 60, is that 69?
I actually don't mind it at 68.
68. Okay. So yeah, I've got this roster, but with like the Lions defense and James Conner. You could also do this roster with the Panthers defense and Miles Sanders, this roster with the Panthers defense and Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is going to be popular, but at the same time, it really doesn't matter with the structure that we have here, right? Because, and what I kind of like about this too is like Chase is going to be popular, Okonkwo is going to be popular, Henry's going to be popular. If we throw in Kamara, he's going to be popular. So we're riding up the field if these guys hit, but no, like literally nobody else will have this salary structure, right? In terms of like they found a way to fit in Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara and Davante Adams and Jamar Chase. And so it's like, these guys can all hit as chalky pieces, and it doesn't matter that they're chalky because the combinatorial ownership is so low. So few people will have like all 4 of these chalky, high-priced guys together. So if they all hit, we're in great shape.
And you know what's crazy is like as I'm looking at this, so here's the context. I do like one head-to-head every week with my dad, and
nice.
I'm kind of looking at this as like this is a safe enough lineup that I can actually do this as a head-to-head.
Has your dad started watching this show?
I don't know yet. I haven't.
He's going to come after you with this same roster.
Right.
Make one change.
I use this exact lineup against him, and then I tell him to watch the show, and he's wow.
No, yeah, it's like, and that's what I like about this Mac, and that's why I said that once I started building all these Mac rosters last night, I was like, I kind of feel like in the game changer, the 1500 single entry, I feel like there's going to be, I think Mac's projected at 5% owned right now. I think he's going to be more like 8 or 9% owned in there. And I could be wrong, but I think that once you start messing around with this, it's like, oh, well, Mac's not that high risk. I obviously with Matt Patricia calling the plays and Joe Judge helping to design the offense, like the Patriots offense has not been great this year, but they've also been good enough, right? And last year, Mac Jones plus Kendrick Bourne had it's I think 9 total games where they went 4x their salary for this week. And then like 4 or 5 of those games, they went like 5x to 6x their combined salary for this week. Like they're capable of doing that. And then throw in Aguilar as well. Like we can get a lot of points here. And even if it falls apart, we're still probably getting like 3.5. It's not going to kill us, right? It's like I looked at like if you look at Mac plus Bourne as an 8.1K player, right? As like Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts or Derrick Henry, and you recognize like a few times you're going to finish with like 20 points, and most of the time they're going to finish with like 30 to 40, right? Like that's pretty good for a guy priced at 8.1K. If we just think of it in terms of salary allocation as opposed to taking up 2 spots with this salary, like it sets up really nicely and allows this flexibility to get all these other, because here's the thing, people who play Mahomes, they're going to have to play Chris Moore or Aguilar, or like they're going to have to take on some salary saver somewhere too, right? So like we're basically just doing that, but condensing our bets on that and then opening up extra upside for other spots. So yeah, like you said, it's actually safe enough to play in a head-to-head, but also, or safe enough to play in like a 300 entry contest, but also has enough upside to win a large field contest, exactly. Which is to me like the perfect type of roster.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's super versatile. So
we've had a lot of fun patting ourselves on the back this week about how awesome our rosters have been.
I know, right?
At least if our rosters bomb, if we got everything wrong this week, we had fun being proud of ourselves for our builds.
Yeah.
But realistically, like I think our builds have been like super sharp this week. I'm biased because this is how we're seeing the slate, obviously. But yeah, no, I like this one a lot.
If all goes worse, if all else fails, it was a good lineup.
It was a good week of it. And honestly, like people ask all the time, they're like, how do I separate results from like process? How do I assess whether or not I'm playing well? And it's like, if you can kind of think through the roster this way and answer these questions and like talk through, can this get to first place? Is it unique enough? Like how many things do I need to go right? You can answer before games ever kick off whether or not you're playing well. Like this is a roster that if we had a whole week of builds like this and then lost money on the weekend, I would still turn the page and be like, that's fine. I had a strong weekend, week 13, I had a bad weekend and it was a bad weekend. Like I played poorly, week 12, I had a bad weekend of not a bad weekend, but like a mediocre weekend of results, but played really well. And this is kind of a week where it's like these builds that we've had, we can look at them and be like, yeah, we're actually building really sharp rosters. If you can say that beforehand, then you can feel comfortable regardless of the results and just be like, take the big picture view of eventually these types of rosters will be hitting in contests.
Exactly. Perfect.
All right. Anything else on your end?
No, nothing else.
All right. As always, thanks for hanging out. For those of you who are hanging out with us early in the show, appreciate it. We're having a lot of fun doing it. Hopefully you guys are having a lot of fun hanging out with us. We will see you. It's Saturday. We'll see you on the site throughout the weekend. We will see you on Xandermere and Hilo's The Slate podcast Saturday afternoon for Inner Circle members. And as always, we will see you at the top of the leaderboards on Sunday.